Hello everybody. This is Chef Jesse with Sacred Kitchen. I'm here to share our most fabulous and foolproof focaccia recipe. Here's a quick video so you can make this simple, delicious dish quickly and easily at home. Let's get started. First, let's start with the ingredients. The first thing that you want to do is get your oven preheated to 450 degrees. Then you'll need 1 cup of hot water that's around 105 to 110 degrees. It should feel like a hot tub that's comfortable to get into, neither lukewarm nor scalding hot. You definitely want it more than warm, but if you put your finger in the water and it's uncomfortable, like it's too hot, then that'll kill your yeast. To this water, you're gonna add 1/2 tablespoon or 1.5 teaspoons of sugar and the same amount of yeast. Using a whisk or a spoon or a fork, you're gonna agitate this yeast so that the yeast can start to eat the sugar. And when it does that, it starts to bloom or blossom. After about 5 or 10 minutes, you'll notice a little head on the top of your yeast and water mixture. It'll smell like a really skunky beer, and that's how you know it's ready to use. While the yeast blooms, take a moment to gather your sauce ingredients and any focaccia toppings you'd like. Vegetables, fresh herbs, cooked proteins like bacon, chicken, or charcuterie all work really well. Get these items washed and dried and cut into small pieces. So here I'm gonna take my flour. I'm gonna take a teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna take about a teaspoon of dried herbs, and I'm gonna mix those up. Then you're gonna take about a tablespoon of your olive oil and add it to the mix, along with your yeast and water mixture. You can give this guy a quick swirl to get all that sugar and goodness up off the bottom. And now take a spatula or a wooden spoon and begin to get this combined. You'll notice that it starts to come together. I'm gonna turn this out onto my surface for kneading here. And what I'm gonna do is bring everything into a ball, and I'm gonna pick it up from the bottom and then press down with the heel of my hands. So as I'm doing this, I'm getting it to combine together, and every time I give it like a little quarter turn. And it's also a great idea to leave about a tablespoon or 2 of your flour out. In case your dough gets too wet or too sticky, it's always nice to have just a little bit left aside in case you need it. Now I don't need to knead this dough a whole lot because we're doing a really quick style recipe where you're gonna wanna be able to get it in a pan really quickly. So as soon as it comes together, I'm feeling good about it. As I mentioned, this dough is feeling a little sticky, so I'm gonna add just a tablespoon or 2 of flour to it to get it to tighten up a little bit. This dough is really versatile, and even if it's a little sticky, it works just fine. I'll show you a couple tricks right now for working with a sticky dough. The first one is to wash your hands. Once you have clean hands, it's a great time to put a tablespoon of oil down on your sheet pan. And I like a little bit on the bread as well. I'm gonna get this on my fingers and get it all spread around. And then I'm gonna take my dough and plop it right down into the middle of the pan. I'm gonna flip it over so some of that oil comes on top. And I'm gonna start pressing it out with my fingers and the heel of my hand. Now this dough loves a lot of oil, so don't be afraid to be really generous with your oil. I'm gonna add even a little bit more here. I'm using the heel of my hand or my fingertips to press this dough out till it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. As I mentioned, this dough is really flexible and really easy to work with. You can turn it into pizza, into rolls, and even to loaves of bread if you'd like. It actually, without the herbs, makes a great cinnamon roll. So you can experiment with the shape. We're gonna let it rise for 20 or 30 minutes in the warmest part of your kitchen. If you have your oven turned on, oftentimes setting it on top of your oven is a great place to do that. Let's set this aside to rise and we'll start working on our sauce. While the dough rests, let's make a quick tomato sauce. Here's the recipe. Now it's time to get the sauce cooking. I'm gonna start with my heat on medium-high. Once my pan is up to a medium heat, I can add a tablespoon of my olive oil and my onions. It's always nice when you add your sauteed veg, when you hear that sizzle in the oil. That's when you know you're at just about the right temperature. Now I'm gonna take a wooden spoon and be able to stir this around while I work on a few other things. So you can see at this moment that our onions are approaching translucent. That's the time when they're gonna start changing colors from that sort of opaque white to something a little bit more clear in nature. That's a great time to add your garlic. If you add it before, depending on how large it's cut, you might burn it. It's also a great time to add your bay leaf. When we add spices to a sauce, what we're doing is we're activating their essential oils. By putting this bay leaf in right now, it's bringing all those essential oils forward, and it's gonna taste absolutely delicious. In just a moment or two, we're also gonna add our dried herbs for exactly the same reason. If you wanted to add some sliced olives or some chopped up rosemary, now would be a great time to do that as well. I'm gonna get my tomatoes ready to go, and also have a little bit of last night's leftover wine ready to deglaze the pan. Now, this is a classic French technique, and it can make a huge difference in your cooking. It's amazingly simple, and I'm about to show it to you right now. I'm gonna turn my heat down just a little bit. And if you look in the bottom of the pan, you'll see that I have this little bits of caramely goodness. These are the sugars in the onions starting to stick to the bottom of the pan. And I want that goodness in my sauce. I'm gonna add my herbs and let those toast. The moment you do that, you're gonna notice that your home smells like an Italian restaurant, a really good one. Once I've got those guys, oh, so good. The magic is always in the sauce. Once you have that going on, now is a great time to add a little bit of wine. Use the wine to pick up that caramely goodness from the bottom of the pan, and it's going to, you'll notice it's gonna reduce and it's gonna get almost syrupy. Once we've got the goodies up off the bottom and we've got it mostly reduced, we're gonna add a little bit of salt, a little bit of our salt. That helps the onions break down as well. And now it's time for our tomatoes. Once the tomatoes are in, we can pump up our heat a little bit because we're just trying to get everything to come together. Now, if you've got a lot of time or you want to make a really slow cooked sauce, you can let it simmer for quite a while, up to an hour. But really, it only needs about 5 or 10 minutes because it's gonna spend time on top of the pizza in the oven anyways. So we're gonna turn this up, we're gonna give it just a couple minutes, and then we're gonna top our pizza. One of the most important things about making delicious food is to taste it every step along the way. If it tastes good at the beginning and in the middle, it's gonna totally taste good at the end. So let's see what this recipe needs right now. This recipe is tried and true and simple. It could just use a little bit of salt. Salt is a personal preference, but it's also the single most important ingredient for flavor. It brings out all the flavors of everything else. So when in doubt, don't be afraid to add a little bit of salt. I'm gonna show you two really simple and easy ways to finish this sauce and to use it on your flatbread. Let's take a look at our dough. Oh, that is gorgeously risen and it's popped up. It's probably more than doubled and it is ready to be topped. We're gonna use the red sauce today, but you can top it with whatever you would like. So the first and simplest way that I love to top this bread is just with this big, chunky, rustic sauce. It continues to break down in the oven and every bite's a little bit different, but totally delicious. That's one simple way. So we're gonna do that with half of our bread. The other thing that is super fun and really simple and delightful to do in the kitchen with your pizza sauce is to use my favorite tool, the immersion blender. I'm gonna take this sauce and put it into a 16-ounce jar that my stick blender fits in, and in just a few swizzes, I'm gonna have perfectly smooth marinara that will be excellent on top of my pizza. Let's go. Your blade needs to be submerged under the liquid, and your liquid doesn't need to be too full. As long as you follow those two principles, you'll be safe and nothing will come flying out. One thing to know is that topping a pizza requires much less sauce than you might think. This recipe is enough for 2 flatbreads. And now it's time for whatever your additional toppings are. I'm gonna keep mine really simple with some Parmesan cheese on top. And as this cooks, it's gonna get a nice and delightful golden brown. Into the oven we go. So people always ask, how long does the bread take? And the answer that chefs always give is, when it's done. The truth is that it varies wildly depending on what your oven is like. We've seen this recipe be finished in as little as 10 minutes, and sometimes it takes as much as 25. What you're gonna wanna do is look for a few signposts. When your bread has got that nice golden brown sheen from the Parmesan, or it's crispy all the way around, that's a really good sign that it's basically done. You also wanna touch it on the top, and if it's firm, tastes like it's gonna be crusty and crunchy, then you know it's also done. Another great way to know what's happening with your bread is you'll see that it starts to pull away from the edges. A pro tip, so to speak, that will make your bread extra delicious, and that is to finish it on a rack. This is gonna keep it from steaming. If we just left it here like this, it would steam and the bottom would be a little soggy and the top would be nice and crusty. If we put it on this small rack or just the regular rack of your oven, it will make a nice crunchy bread all the way around. All right, so what we have here is this pizza has been nice and crispy on all the sides, so we're gonna take it out here real quick. I wanna show you just how crispy this is on the back side of our bread. You can hear it. Delightful. Don't forget, don't burn your face, but don't forget to eat a piece right out of the oven. Delicious.